Welcome to Global Professionals in Portugal. My name is Cordelia, and today's guest is Amy Adler, who is coming into us from Denver in the United States. She is a LinkedIn specialist, and she also works on resumes. And she's here today to specifically share with us some strategies if you're moving to Portugal or overseas in general. How do you do your LinkedIn? What are some strategies you can? Amy, thank you so much for being here.
Cordelia, thank you so much for inviting me.
Amy and I went to college together 10 minutes ago, and here we are, maybe 15 minutes. So, Amy, first of all, would you share a little about how you came to be the resume writing LinkedIn pro that you are now?
Thank you for asking. So, after we finished college, I launched a career in book publishing. About 15 years ago, I was friends with somebody who was a great salesperson, but didn't think of herself as a writer, and she needed a resume. So we met and I helped her get the resume done. And as it turned out, she got the job offer and it was very exciting for her. And I thought, wow, I didn't know I could do this, but apparently I could do this. And I didn't even know at that time that it was a career option. I applied for a resume writing role and got it and worked crazy number of hours those first couple of years working for somebody, and then in a scarier move struck out on my own, and that was about 13 years ago. Since then I have built up a business working primarily with executives on their resumes and their cover letters and their career portfolios overall, but their LinkedIn profiles as well, to support that of the handful of certifications that I've earned over time. I think it's really crucial to stay up on what is truly the largest Rolodex with
Right.
something like 900 million users, maybe a little bit more now. That was my last check. So this is a global platform that makes anybody accessible to anybody else, and in the best possible way for the right kind of promotion, for the right kind of visibility. A person who's engaged in any kind of a move, whether it's local to a new role in their same town or across the country or across the world, being on LinkedIn is essential to having that window into
Mhm.
who somebody is and what they are. So hiring teams in every corner of the world can find out what you stand for and what you're good at.
One of the things that we actually worked with Amy on is, even though we weren't job searching, we are consulting. And so we wanted to make sure that we were getting as much value out of being on LinkedIn as we could. She helped us with our keywording and like SEO, you do on a website, you do the same with your LinkedIn profile. And we do get clients from LinkedIn where they search, they find us, and they call us. We did that before we worked with Amy, and it's gotten better since we did work with Amy. You took a very methodical approach to working on our LinkedIn profile, and I really wanted to have you on the show so you could talk a little bit about that, because I think that it would be valuable to really anyone in any field, but especially if you're moving and you're going to be in an environment where people are probably looking you up. What are some strategies people can use to make their profiles on LinkedIn more effective?
First of all, thank you for giving the background of our work together. And I'm so glad that you are reaping the benefits, because that is really the point, to have that visibility and that searchability. And I think that's
Mhm.
the meat of it, is saying something is certainly better than saying nothing. So the worst
Right.
possible profile somebody can have, I think, is when they have it completely blank and they use the default settings, which is job title at company, and then they have dates and time, years and job titles and that sort of thing. But it doesn't really help anybody understand who they are and what they do. A next level is, frankly, copying in your resume, but that's not really what belongs in a LinkedIn profile. To take it to the next level, whether somebody is doing what you're doing in consulting or job searching, they need to take what they know about themselves and rethink it for this global audience. Explore who you are, what you've done, and think about that aspect of it. So figuring out not just where you've been and all the things that you've done, but what your audience is going to search you or search for to find you, is the where the magic happens. So if we can break it down from top to bottom, of course, your name is going to be there. You can't have anything else in your name field except potentially your designations. So that might be your certifications. If you have a degree,
Mhm.
that kind of a thing can go there. And that's okay. Anything else, LinkedIn will kick out. The next layer down in your profile is that headline, and you get 220 characters to tell a really quick story of what you know how to do and who you do it for. So using those designations and your audience and your industry, and maybe something that's really unique and special about you in that small space, can do wonders for the branding apart from your name. If somebody's looking for your name, they'll find you. But these three fields, again, your headline, your job titles, and your skills section, are what recruiters are going to be using as potentially a primary filter. It reflects what we think of as like Google SEO. So the
Right.
long tail phrases are probably going to have more impact because a recruiter is looking for the lid to their pot. They're not looking for anyone who can do finance. Make sure your audience knows that, and you're giving them, spoon feeding them what they need to hear. And it's going to help them and provide that findability, but also that credibility once they're there. Oh, this is my person. And so the next layer in, if I may go there, after these
Mhm.
fields is, of course, your experience and all the other things that you can do to build out a robust profile. Once they
So
get
one of
there,
the things that really surprised me is that for the experience, it was deep. You use almost every character in the field.
I would like to think that everybody's name is unique. And I want to add a little bit of a footnote to that. I always use my middle initial.
Mhm.
And in my LinkedIn profile, custom URL, which I encourage everybody to acquire. It's easy.
Yep.
But if you have a name like mine, in which there are a couple of other folks out there who have the same first and last name, I would encourage you to find a custom URL that has your middle initial,
Yep.
linkedin.com/IN, right? That's everyone's prefix, /Amy L. Adler. And I've changed that from whatever it originally assigned me, which was probably Amy L. Adler and a bunch of letters and numbers. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Amy L. Adler. You sift through the dozens of people who somehow have the same name as that. As I, if I'm just a regular person, I'm just using my regular name. And I do use my middle initial in virtually everywhere, my email
Right.
signature and my other social channels, X and Facebook and wherever else I
Right.
get, because that's how I self-define. But if you have a
Well,
question,
I was
please.
I was going to ask you about languages. We have people who are operating in multiple countries. Now, you do have this feature in LinkedIn where it can translate for you, which is fantastic. But do you think it's worth it for people to put multiple languages in their own profile?
Thing number one is every single individual by LinkedIn's terms of service, whatever you count for that, uh, allows you to have a single profile. The exception is if you have a profile in another language, and then you can have
Oh,
two. I will make sure that we have that link to LinkedIn's resources for you, and our listeners can use that right from the horse's mouth about what's acceptable and how to do it, and how a profile is then read by somebody who might not speak your language. So
okay.
I'm going to see your profile in English because yours is in English, and my primary
Right.
language on the platform is English. If your primary language was something else, if it was, say, Portuguese, and I don't speak Portuguese, so I'm not going to have that set as my primary language. So I'm going to see um, what you put out there in English, not in Portuguese, but your
Okay.
Portuguese profile would come across in Portuguese. I think the real issue on a higher level is to what extent is your profile accessible to somebody who's local to you. It's actually not terribly different from moving cities. I think the universality of LinkedIn is much easier. You can use the words Portugal and Lisbon and other sort of
Other
topical
Portugal words.
well, you could use Portuguese specifically, but that is where I was heading, is that finding somebody is one thing, making them understand that they found the right person in a deeper way,
Right.
where that all that other content comes in, and using maybe not all 2,600 characters of the about section, but maybe 2/3 is not a bad target.
You said your profile can be in two languages at the most?
I think you can have more than two languages, but I think you have to translate it yourself or put it in your
Okay.
language if you were native. But that's the only legitimate reason, according to LinkedIn, that somebody can have more than one profile. I think the contrast is when somebody asks me if I could be a teacher or I could be a librarian. I made that up,
Right.
a real person. But can I have two profiles, one about being a teacher and one about being a
Right.
librarian? That is not possible. That's going to get
Okay.
somebody super confused and maybe kicked off. But If you're a teacher in the US and you want to be a teacher in Portugal, you can have parallel profiles that are
Okay.
rough translations of one another to appeal to that
Yeah.
geographic audience.
I'm just thinking out loud now, but it's probably worth having a translator do that as well. I'm thinking we're probably going to have our profiles translated into Portuguese because it just stuff gets lost in translation.
Literally, we're taught in a very sort of academic way, or you and I both, I think we probably have very similar experiences.
Mhm.
And though that idiomatic language
Right.
doesn't always come through, and there's always also a chance of saying something that we think is idiomatic in English that doesn't translate at all into whatever language. And having somebody who comes from both sides and sees the nuances on both is probably very wise. It's authentic.
So now, if you have your own business or you're part of a small business, can you talk a little bit about the type of content that is best for the profile of the business page versus the profile of the leadership team? Do you have any suggestions for that?
I think having that business page, regardless of what you actually do with it, is crucial because it enables the individual employees of the company to tag that company in your profile. So you have that icon next to
Right.
your company name and your job title, which lends a certain amount of credibility that the
Yeah.
company isn't a fly by night, didn't just get made up that morning. One of the biggest mistakes people make about LinkedIn is they think that it's set in stone and that it's the only way to do something. It's going to be a bit of a let's put out there what we think is the best option and then see how the community or how the industry reacts to it. So you can have a first pass, let's say, and refine it later. And I don't want people to get in that analysis paralysis because it's better to have something there for just that purpose for the individual profiles than to have nothing at all. And you get to talk about the products and services and the wisdom that you offer, and you have yet another stream of content capability. So you have a different thread of posts or videos or whatever else you want to put in there in addition to your own private profile, but they are connected. So then that individual's profile can reflect that individual's role and how they are marketing the services of the organization or the products of the organization, but through their own eyes versus the eyes of the company, more broadly speaking. And of course, when you're writing your own profile, you get to have that first person conversation with your audience. So using the words, I do this, or I have done this, or this is what my experience is, makes sense to the reader because you're engaging them in a dialogue that you want to continue beyond that sort of digital experience into a phone call or a video chat, and have that be the inception for a fruitful business relationship.
So now a lot of people, when they move across the globe, they also change careers in some way. So what are some of your LinkedIn strategies for career changers?
So certainly the more levers you pull in a career move, the more complex it's going to be. So whether that is geography, level, industry, job title, these all have to play into your strategy. And I appreciate the question because this is the kind of a question that puts a resume writer through their paces. So no, it's true. And
it worked for it today, Amy.
It's fun. For me anyway, because I want to be able to dig in and figure out how we're going to use somebody's lived experiences and their professional background to shape the discussion so that somebody else, a different audience, can find them and understand in a meaningful way why they belong in this entirely new environment. It's 100% about telling the truth. And I don't want anybody to hear this and think that this is about fabricating a story just because it sounds good. It's really not that. It's very artfully taking what somebody has done and using the language we expect a different audience to think of when they are searching for the person they're looking for. We want that our person to show up in that list. How do we make it so that person falls into that 1,000+ search result list so that they can even be part of the discussion? And I think it's very clearly about looking at who these people are. How do we then take that and reformulate those so we're still telling the same story, but using the perspective of this future audience?
It sounds like what you're saying is you want to restate maybe what you did over your career through the lens of your new roles.
Let's say if somebody is, I don't know, going from, let's say, teacher to librarian. So somebody might talk about working in a school and sharing their experience teaching reading and maximizing literature for young minds, and use the kinds of language and building a school in classroom library so the word gets in there so they're not saying they're a librarian. Or maybe saying building a program for the students in the classroom who served in their classroom jobs as librarian, as well as line leader and recess monitor or whatever other, obviously making this up, but the word is not being used in the sense that I'm now a librarian, because that would be not true, but the word is in there. And when you put that content in, any word is going to be searchable. Again, those three fields that I mentioned before, the headline, the job titles, and the skills are going to be the juiciest, let's say. But that word talking about the student who has the job in the classroom of being a librarian is now going to be a word that is findable.
Okay.
And it's valuable to be creative about the way you talk about what you want to be doing. We know you want to do something. What can you do to make somebody else's life easier, better, more effective? How can you help their customers and their stakeholders?
Is there a tool that you use or that you can recommend so that, let's say I did want to look up all the keywords related to marketing or librarianing or whatever? Is there something so that I could be like, oh, here's a list of keywords?
There's no sort of master list of keywords. We don't know.
Okay.
Here's what I can recommend. It's twofold. One is use the LinkedIn platform, the jobs tab on the LinkedIn platform. Look at jobs that you want to be considered for and see what the keywords are that are recommended through the platform. If using those tells exactly what kinds of skills that might be missing from your profile that you might want to add. And it used to be you only had 50, now you can have 100. Oh, and pro tip, if you make, I haven't done this yet, but I know that it's possible to take a separate document beyond your resume, call Amy Adler's keyword resume, and upload that to the jobs platform on LinkedIn. That's just keywords for the things you want. And then you can have even more than the 100 keywords that you can manually type in. That's one way of doing things. The other way of doing things is, frankly, by using the capabilities of ChatGPT. And I'm not talking about writing your resume through ChatGPT, which I frankly think is a terrible idea, and not because I'm a resume writer. That's not the reason. The reason is that ChatGPT, like most tools, are very fast and frankly stupid too. They'll do what you say really quickly and really well and follow your instructions, even if they're bad instructions. So let's give them really good instructions. And the really good instructions is, let's say you want a particular job, you found the ideal job posting, but you're not sure where the keywords are. Take that job posting, which of course is public, right? Paste it into ChatGPT and ask it to identify the hard skills for you. It's not perfect, but it's remarkably good. You'll still have to use your own insight and your own intuition, but it will give you a really good sense of what the keywords are, if you will, for that particular job posting. And if you do this across 10 or 12 or 20, you might all of a sudden have a list that looks like an amalgamation or a connection across all of these particular roles that are probably pretty similar in any case. And you now know, oh, these are the 10 things I should talk about because they're in all of these positions.
Oh, that's a great tip. Okay.
Yeah. And it's, again, not foolproof, but because it has to be vetted through human eyes. But it's a really quick and dirty and fast and effective way of drilling down.
So you're taking the job description. I just want to review that because I thought that was a really good tip. Taking the job description, putting it into ChatGPT, and saying, what are the hard skills in this job description? And then you do that for, say, 10 or 20 job descriptions, and then you take that list, and then you have a pretty good keyword list.
And you can assume that if these are the most important skills or areas of expertise for these kinds of positions, that, of course, all have to be mostly the same, because it's not going to work across one type of job in 20 versions is different from 20 jobs in one version. Right. This is what the hiring team or the recruiters are going to be using to find somebody who looks like this job description. So let's give them what they want. The Google keyword ecosystem is always mysterious, but this, we know the end game. Like, this is the job description that the recruiter has put out. This is what they want to fill. So how do we get from where we are to where we know they are standing?
If you're moving, you can do your profile in a couple different languages. You can make sure you have a keyword rich, relevant profile that's related to what you do. What are some other sort of relocation strategies? Do you have any final tips for people before we wrap up?
So I've written obviously plenty of resumes and LinkedIn profiles for people working or thinking about moving to the US. I've also written plenty of resumes and LinkedIn profiles for individuals living all across the world.
Okay.
I think there is a subtle but crucial difference between the American ethic around doing this. I don't want to say ethic, it's not like we're trying to do something bad, but maybe the sentiment or the feeling of these kinds of documents versus particularly profiles and resume content in Asia and in Europe. And I think the difference is that Americans expect job seekers to, and I don't mean lie, I really don't mean that, but to say, this is what I did as part of my career in my specific situation. And of course, as you move up the ladder and become sort of at a higher level, it's all about my team and my leadership. I think there is a much broader appeal for that in the US because we're so individualistic. I think abroad, there is a sense, and maybe individual experience may tell different, but I think there's a sense that we're all in this together. We do things together. Taking credit for an entire organization's or group's work won't fly. And we are taught to soften that a little bit. And it's not about not taking the credit, where you certainly deserve credit for doing the work, but to be mindful of who your audience is and what they're expecting to hear. And the way it's presented is equally important as what you say in terms of your accomplishments in your history. I know that those kinds of things will carry through and that people will see the kind of expertise a person has. And I hope that the soft skills, not just the hard skills we were talking about before, also come through so that their message is picked up in a captivating way because they have a well-rounded approach to presenting themselves that fits with the local expectation.
Amy, thank you so much for being our guest today. Amy's information is going to be in the description if you want to reach out to her. She does work with job seekers, but she also works consultants. She does all sorts of cool things. And thank you so much for being here, Amy.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
If you have any questions about LinkedIn or anything else, please go ahead and put them in the comments. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.